Alrighty, thank you so much for waiting, guys. Thanks for coming. My name is Steve. Welcome to my channel, Re-Vera. Hush this music. Alright, enough of that. Right on. Alright, we're live. Hey guys, thanks so much for coming. Very excited about having a stream finally. I've been doing a lot of the roadside rants. Hopefully you've been catching those. It's fun to talk about just short little bits of content while I'm on my way to work and whatnot. So I've been having a blast with that. Love to get some comments. Let me know what you think. Yeah, so Wesley, I've already posted a teaser thing about it. We're just going to have a good talk. Conservative Theist versus Leftist Atheist. So looking to be a good old time. Let me give him a call.
Hello.
Hello, welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you, Steve?
I'm fantastic. This is my friend Wesley from Facebook. We've had a lot of great discussions over the years. So just to start with, you mind telling us a little bit kind of about yourself and your background and just about yourself, what you've been doing, stuff like that? Kind of introduce yourself.
Well, I guess for work, I'm in the IT field. I'm an automation specialist, is where my degree is in. It's a kind of a division of engineering. People that aren't familiar, kind of like an industrial electrical and computer engineer, basically. So I do all the automated processes in plants and stuff like that. That's what I optimize and maintain and all that sort of thing, design,
Interesting.
whatnot.
It's definitely a good emerging field to be in. That's for sure.
Yeah, I kind of chose that specifically for that reason. I didn't realize, I kind of knew I'd like it, but I didn't realize how much I'd like it, and I love it. I'm basically an industrial computer programmer in a sense. So it's kind of a hybrid between computer programming and a little more engineering and electrical too. So it's kind of,
Totally.
I mean, everything nowadays with technology is, it's all, you kind of got to know a little bit of everything to get in there. So
yeah, it's hilarious. I was one of the younger managers, and people would ask me questions and I would fix it because it's, like really basic kind of stuff, but
right.
Well, let me show you how to clear your cache in Google or whatever. And
I got something funny. Yeah.
And then I got promoted to be the digital director, and now I'm basically like I handle digital marketing. People come to me with all kinds of tech issues. Like I got to figure everything out. Like I'm not a programmer.
Oh
I
wow.
don't know that much about it,
Yeah.
but at least I know how to figure out how to figure stuff out. If that makes sense. I
Well,
know
I
who
think
to ask.
that's the critical thinking part. And a funny thing about that is, um, you'd be surprised. I've run into a lot of proprietary devices and stuff that I have to fix or figure out what's going on with or install even sometimes. And you'd be amazed at how many people don't even bother to read the user's manual. That's like
Oh
my
man.
go-to thing. I just open up the user's manual and there's
Oh,
troubleshooting and all kind of stuff. So even if I don't know the
100%.
product, it's like,
I mean, that's
yeah, I
critical
mean,
thinking. Success leaves clue. We got to realize we're not the first person to have this problem. Like that's the first step to solving your problem.
exactly.
Somebody else
And they
has already
designed it
solved
and
this
like that.
problem. You
Yeah,
just got to like find out who and
exactly,
do what they did.
exactly. Meanwhile,
So
everybody else is scratching their heads, going, "What's going on?" And it's like, we know there were people that designed this, and they probably could tell you.
yeah,
So,
and the interesting thing is if you don't have the owner's manual or you don't want to look for it, you can find them all online for free. Like pretty
that's how
much
I
all
have
of
to
them.
do it. Yeah, because they don't keep this stuff
Of
around, and
course
it's
not.
impossible to find half the time. So, so anyway, don't tell my secret. I guess I probably shouldn't have said that on air. I might be out of a job the next guy. No, I'm just kidding. It's a little more
No,
involved in that, but that's definitely a resource that a lot of people just kind of overlook.
no, it's a
So
skill. Just
I'm a nerd.
so many people. Like I'm a manager now, so I experience this. So many people uh, come up against the problem, and they're like, somebody should fix this. Right, instead of just fixing it, like a lot of times it's like
Right,
you could fix this, or you
or at
could
least
go
find,
tell
or
a
at least start
manager
the
and be
trailer.
like,
Yeah,
you should fix this, but they just think to
exactly.
themselves somebody should fix this. They don't tell anybody, and it sits there not getting fixed for 6 weeks, and you finally tell somebody, they're like, why didn't you tell me 6 weeks ago? That was easy.
Well, I think you've hit, yeah, I think you've hit something that in a broader context. I think because of the way I'm going to assume it's probably technology, but because of how comfortable technology has made some of our lives, I think we kind of just expect things to be done for us, and we don't, you know what I mean? I think it's just a kind of like a side of effect of having like a maybe some sort of I don't know if it's prosperity. I think it's more of just comforts. I mean, I think we just get comfortable and we just assume that everything just works, you know? That's not necessarily, it obviously isn't the
Yeah.
case.
Well,
Somebody
I
has
mean,
to fix it
the
when it
fact
goes through.
is, we evolved over a long period of time, and it wasn't. We have had a crazy amount of changes in like the last couple decades. Like the things have
Right.
never changed as quickly. So
Absolutely.
people don't adapt as fast as you might expect them to. We're not these perfectly rational like agents that we like to think of ourselves as. So
It's a great point.
you know,
And with so many different, you have so many moving parts, right? That, I mean, just one individual has so many moving things going on. And so you combine that with a dense population or a political network or an economic, socioeconomic, and you end up with this organism that sometimes might seem unmanageable because it really is kind of it's hard to put it all together and see the big picture sometimes, because there's so many different things that happen, and the cycles, like you said, the cycles are happening nowadays on such a faster level that what used to be like a 100-year cycle of busts and booms maybe is now, it's like, or not even busts and booms, but we'll just say technology and different things like that. I mean, or political developments. I mean, nowadays it's like, imagine 10 years ago, politics. I mean, even in 10 years, politics has changed a lot, in my opinion. But then you go
oh
back
for
maybe
sure,
50
just in
years.
the last 5 years,
Yeah,
it's changed a lot.
right. And so I don't think that gap's going to be getting any wider. I think it's going to keep getting shorter because the technology is just rapid. Everything gets ramped up, I think, because communication mostly probably.
Yeah, it's
Um,
interesting because well, first off, how old are you? At least roughly
I'm 38.
38. Okay, but the same age as I am. I think I'm 37. So,
Okay.
like, we grew up in a similar time, so we saw this all happen. Like, when I was we didn't get our first computer of any type until I think I was like 8 or 9,
Exactly. Same here.
and it was,
And
like
it
Windows
blew our mind.
95, and it was like incredible,
Right.
and we grew up with it, and we grew up seeing things constantly getting rapidly better, and people talked about the curve and how things were exponentially getting so much better and faster, and
Right.
it is definitely, the curve has definitely petered out pretty substantially from what I understand. Like, with the current computing technology, I feel like they've nearly maximized it. Like, as they can't build computer chips more densely than they are. They can't really dramatically increase speed. They keep finding ways to make improvements, but it's not the same exponential growth that they used to have.
Yeah, but I'm not sure. I think it's more on the demand. I'm not sure we have a demand for it. I think if you look at like the
There's
mobile
a
phone
demand for it.
market,
Well,
what, for computing power?
yeah, I think so, because there's a
I mean, on a personal level, I mean.
well, on a personal level, I mean, yeah, every time we've come up with more computing power, we've found more ways to use it, right? I mean, IBM was like, oh, no one's going
Right.
to need more than 5 of these machines, because only big companies
Yeah.
and governments are going to need them. Well,
Yeah.
like, right now, virtual reality exists, and it's pretty cool.
Well, there you go. That's a good point.
It's
Yeah.
pretty cool, but it has some pretty severe limitations. I have a set. It's really
Absolutely.
awesome, but the graphics and quality of it is not quite up to speed. So, with
Okay.
dramatically more
Now
computing
you yeah,
power,
that's a great point. Right.
now you could get into augmented reality and all kinds of stuff. So anyway,
You need real time processing until we hit that wall of where everything's in, real time, full,
yeah. Well, I mean, this could get in.
textures, however you want.
I was gonna try to play a game here just to keep myself occupied because I think I'm a little ADD, but it seems to be causing buffering in my stream, so I'm just gonna quit it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, it could get into a bit of a disagreement we don't need to start with, but I was gonna say another use of computing power. I really think we're gonna need more computing power and more speed in order to more replicate true, like, human-like AI, and that's truly the next
Right.
step. Because
Sure.
once you have that, it makes space exploration and mining and colonization and stuff far cheaper because machines live in space better than we do.
So what do you think? What do you think the role? Because Google, if I'm not mistaken, they just got the quantum computing started. So I think that's going to be where it goes. Because,
Exactly.
like you said,
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to get physical densities, but quantum computing is going to be it.
Yeah, from
I actually
when I
think-
was looking at it a while ago, it seemed like if you I was looking up artificial intelligence. I'm fascinated by neuroscience, and it sounded like, from all my like looking into it and checking numbers and stuff, it seemed like with our current technology, we could model out a human brain and all its neurons and connections and the neural net and
There you
all this
go.
kind of stuff. The problem is
Right.
it would be like at a room scale. Like, the amount of computing it would take would be a large room filled with equipment. And because of that, it would not only be spectacularly expensive, but it would be extremely clunky and slow. Like, here's the thing. If our
Right.
consciousness operated at 1,000th or 1,000,000th the speed it currently does, how would you even recognize it as consciousness?
Right. Well, we've already been through that, though. Not with AI, but with just computing in general. I mean, we had those same arguments back then. Like, how are we ever going to get this mainframe room computer that we had to liquid cool and put it in sub-zero temperatures and all this
Yeah.
stuff just to get it to punch a hole card? You know what I mean? With some
Yeah.
code.
Well,
Very simple computing.
Yeah, the problem with it being at room scale is you're running up against the laws of physics because of the speed of light is what's causing it to
Right.
be slow.
Yeah.
Because it's bouncing around so much, it makes a big difference. So when you have that same amount of complexity in the size of a football, like our brain, then now it's operating at a lot faster rate. So quantum computing has a whole lot of of capability of changing all kinds of stuff in
Okay.
likely somewhat scary ways. Anyway.
Since you brought it up, why don't I just throw this out there? I've never heard anybody say this, and I don't know where I got the idea. It just happened.
Yeah, throw it out.
So, this is all speculation, so I'm not claiming any sort of reason, or although it does make sense to me. I believe that quantum computing is going to be used to attempt to predict the future at some point.
Oh, of course.
And the reason I believe that is because if you feed a certain field of data, if you can somehow get, it's just like the things like they're doing with the false news stories. You know that one, what's it called? Deep or what? Do you know what I'm talking about? The AI right now. Elon Musk made a mention of it being dangerous, and I think maybe and some other people have too.
Yeah, there's.
I played around with it a little bit. I played around with it a little bit, and I got some very interesting results. And maybe we'll have that discussion another day, because you'd be interested in seeing what I got out of it. I put in some very simple things into it and got some pretty strange results. So,
are you saying you got the opportunity to fiddle around with their actual like AI thing?
Yeah, I mean, I can show you where you can do it too. It runs off of Amazon's cloud computing, and I forgot what they call it. What is it? Whatever it computes it off of their thing. You just punch in, like you can punch in a field of text, and it will create this story. But I've punched in a few specific strings and got some very strange results. That you can also do this. There's this picture.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I'll show you. I'll go ahead and tell you it's simultaneously fascinating and frightening at the same time. So it's pretty wild.
Yeah, well, I mean, it does certainly go into risks. I mean, there's legit risks people talk about. Artificial intelligence, if it becomes like smarter than us and actually thinks for itself, and then like leaks into the internet and like all kinds of stuff,
Yeah,
that's still like one concern.
I mean, I would link
Another
it.
concern is just if we have more computing power, and they manage to hack a true connection between machine and our nervous system. Like that opens up a whole other world. And now you're in Matrix territory, and there's all kinds of interesting rabbit trails to go down.
Well, I just read an article today. There's an MIT.
Oh yeah.
It was published by MIT. Did you see that with the doctor, the surgeon that wants to? Yeah, he's trying to do it right now.
Yeah, I've seen several. I mean, the fact that they can like give you bionic arms if you lose your arm, and it can read your brain to make the motions and stuff, like they're obviously already working on it, so it's only a matter of time.
Well, neuroscience has gone. That is one area of physiological science that has really made like crazy strides. I mean, neuroscience has gone in the past 25 years. They've made huge advances in that.
Very interesting.
So,
well,
it really is.
We totally got sidetracked down some rabbit trails, but hey, fun times. So I wanted to talk about how to have a talk with people who we disagree with.
Absolutely. So, I think this is a great foundation.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do think part of talking to people you disagree with is to kind of break the ice and try to understand people and kind of build a little rapport there. That is important if you want to have a good charitable discussion instead of just blood sports.
Yeah, and if your end results is to actually resolve conflict, the founding fathers in the U.S. Have a kind of a great example of this. There's people that they really disagreed on a lot of stuff, but they used a methodology to reconcile these conflicts. And I think this isn't related to really what we're talking. I mean, it is slightly related, but I'm not expecting us to use that sort of methodology here. But the point I'm making is that if you're in it, we first need to determine what our purpose is. If it's just to persuade somebody, or is it to learn or find truth, or is it to understand another position? So, I mean, everything starts out with purpose, right? So you have to consider what your intentions are. And when I think it gets really it gets difficult on online discussions. I mean, you and I have had plenty of these problems because
Oh, for sure.
I'll just tell you today, with your little trailer, when I watched that, it evokes a different thing when I see this person actually talking.
Right.
I don't know if you know what I mean, but when me and you are talking through text, you're not a person.
Right.
You are, but you're not. I have to remind myself you're a person and to
No,
treat you with
this
kindness,
is
but
entirely true, and this is why I've been making a conscious effort to try to stop debating online as much as possible. The
yeah,
only reason I still debate online is to try to get people to talk to me verbally, because I've been
there you
debating online for like a decade, and it like never changes anybody's mind. It's a giant waste of time.
go. Right.
It's been very educational for me, so I shouldn't say it's a waste of time.
Me too.
You know,
Yeah.
it's taught me a lot
A
about
similar
logic. I
situation.
hear about concepts I'd never heard about, and then I Google them, and then I actually know a little bit about them. You know, it's a good way to educate yourself by talking to people who disagree with you at that as high a level
Right.
as you can. It's educational, it's good, but
It keeps your
actually
defenses
changing
sharp
people's
too.
mind, no, because it's literally a true thing that 90% of our communication is nonverbal. It's not
Right.
it's not language, at least. So you know,
Absolutely.
it's the tone of voice, it's body language, it's all that kind of stuff, and that makes
Absolutely.
all the difference in the world. When you're just reading words, you can interpret those words so many different ways in your head. We do this
Yeah.
subconsciously, even when we try not to. We read tone into text. That's why all the time you'll see somebody be like, "You mad, bro?" And it's like, "No, I wasn't mad. I was just,
Yeah.
pointing out."
Well, I don't want to sound like an old timer, but because I'm not, but I'm still conscious of where things can go, and it's pretty obvious to me that the way, especially the next generation, is interacting with each other, there's no doubt in my mind that it's going to have an effect on their social milieu. Like how they interact. As far as I'll give you the most obvious example is the textual interaction. Now that everything's mobile and you have a lot of people focusing, now you also have Snapchat and things like that are kind of balancing it out a little bit, but it's still not as personal because everything's so in your face, 15-second snip. Like there's no time to really spend with people and really understand them. That's not really what they're doing. It's just kind of like
It's
back and forth and
a legitimately huge problem. A lot of people in academia are very concerned about it. My brother, who has his own channel that's 10 times the size of mine, and he has a master's in philosophy. His, I think, highest rated paper, he submitted a paper to a peer reviewed journal, and it was about the problem of how social media is impacting people's brains and making it harder for people to
right,
be social. Like, we have a whole generation that acts like they seem to be getting higher and higher on the autism spectrum because they're not understanding
right.
how to relate to people because they grow up looking at a screen their whole life. And now we're sounding like a bunch of boomers talking, but
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
and I'm gonna make
this
it
has
even
never
worse.
happened in human history. Like, this is uncharted
Yeah,
territory,
exactly,
and that's
exactly.
worth thinking about for sure, at least.
And if
Uh,
you rewind a little bit, the radio and the telephone technology leading up to this, the purpose of it, whole purpose of it was the opposite direction. So like the whole purpose and it did do that. It made the world smaller. I mean, obviously, there's no doubt about that. But now that the world's so small, it's like we don't want to interact with each other. It's like, we can interact with anybody we want, but in real life, it's like
yeah.
that's
Well,
actually work to go knock on somebody's door or sit down with somebody and have dinner or,
I
you
think
know,
about things at a systemic level all the time, and I think my greatest skill is problem solving. I try to solve problems, and when you're trying to solve a reoccurring systemic problem, you never try to solve it through like willpower, because you just, if you continue to do things you've always done, you're going to continue to get the same results.
right,
The important
right,
thing, looking at big systemic problems, I think, is to look at the incentive structure, and this is
right,
a whole other rabbit trail we'll have to come back to, but I think the core problem we're talking about right now, more than anything else, is capitalism, because we have an attention economy that's monetizing people's attention So you have the best psychologists
Absolutely.
in the world working for app developers, trying to keep us looking at screens as much as possible.
It's a problem for
Yeah.
sure.
And so the incentive structure is pushing us the wrong way on that. So going back to a
Absolutely.
more communal type of society would be beneficial. You know, we want people to
Yeah,
engage with
definitely.
people on a real level more. It's one of the reasons I've been pushing people to
Definitely.
be out there canvassing for Bernie more, because, you know, getting out there and meeting some people in real life and then doing positive things together is a good thing.
Oh
So,
yeah, that's a great thing.
yeah.
So let's tie it together. Let's start. Let's get to the topic because I think that's a really good way to start. And if you don't mind, I'll kick it off. You're talking about we're talking about different groups of people. Now we obviously see you and I just had a whole conversation, a brief conversation, and never once did we have to disagree on anything. And like you said in your trailer, we do disagree on just about everything, and people will find that out really shortly.
Yeah.
We're just we're just kind of and we're nice to each other, but we haven't always been nice to each other for sure.
Well, yeah. I
But
mean, we've
I think
both
we've
been snippy
learned
before.
something.
Defensive.
Yeah, I think both of us have learned something. And I don't want to speak for you, but I think I've learned things from you in terms of how to engage with different, because I don't want to get ahead of myself, but what were you saying? Go ahead if you were saying something.
No, yeah, it's true. I mean, we've been much more confrontational online at points. I mean, we've had good faith discussions, but we've also caught each other on bad days and like called each other idiots and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So I mean,
There's been a turning point lately, though. Would you agree that
yeah, I think
recently there
definitely.
was a day I can remember the moment. There was a moment where we kind of both were like, you know what, we might not be as different, even though, because here's the thing, man. We haven't read the same books. We haven't had the same experience, but we obviously all people share things, right?
Right.
We all share certain things, and that's where we got to start with, because, and that's going to get into. I actually came up with 3 things that would help us.
Yeah, I don't know if you're
If
looking
you
at
don't,
the screen, but I've had my kind of list up on the screen for a while. So definitely give us
unfortunately
your
I'm
3
down.
things, and then we can look at
I
my
wish
things and
I had
go
to.
from there.
Yeah, unfortunately, I had to switch over my Wi-Fi today, so it's I got somebody changing out the
Yeah, I mean, the
modem and
only way
stuff.
to
So I'm
do it
not
if you're
even looking at
calling
the
in on
screen
your
right now.
phone is if you had a second device or computer with it up with the sound off, then you can kind of somewhat watch. But otherwise, it's no big
Well,
deal.
next time I definitely will do that.
I'm
It
gonna
just
read it off
caught
to
me at a
you
bad
as we
time.
go, so it's no big deal. You're not really missing anything.
Okay, and that way next time maybe I can interact with your viewers too, because if they might be asking questions, so you might have to help me out with that if anybody's saying
No, to be
anything.
perfectly honest, this is a really bad time because 2 of the biggest streamers that my audience is kind of pulled from, Vosh and Xanderhall, are both
Okay.
streaming right now. Plus, everyone's watching South Carolina primary stuff.
Oh,
So
okay. Well, good. Well,
there's like
that's
no
okay.
live
Well, they'll
viewers
be
right
able
now.
to
I think
just.
there might be 1 or 2 people. If you can, nobody's commented yet, so you're welcome to comment.
Well, that's
So
good
this will be
because
something people
honestly,
watch later, and it's more for us to just
right.
kind of talk. So don't feel like there's
Well, I
100
think
people
that's
watching
probably
because
a
they
good
aren't.
thing. Yeah, I think it's probably a good thing because we're talking about how to talk to people, and at least for this foundational discussion, it might be useful that we don't pay attention to any of that for a minute and let's actually get something done. If you don't mind, I came up with kind of 3 things I've been thinking about.
Yeah, go for it.
And this is a recent thing that is and this is partially where honestly I've had a problem with it for decades. You know, it's something, and I think I'm not going to point any fingers, but you might be able to sympathize with what I'm about to say. But it occurred to me I'd say a couple months ago, some things that I was doing wrong. Well, I don't want to say that, but some areas where in this context that I could improve. And the first one is, okay, well, let me just name the 3 things that I came up with. Okay. The first one is empathy, The second one is facts, and the third one is solutions. And I think we both already kind of hinted at this. But the first thing about empathy, the thing is when you're talking with somebody, the first thing you need to do, and this comes down to why, we have all these societal norms and stuff, politeness and all these different things. It's because you want to establish a bond with somebody first. If you don't have a bond, you're really not. There's nothing that's holding you together. So if you haven't established a bond with somebody you're communicating with, at any point in time, they can not be receptive to what you have to say. There's nothing holding them back from just saying, you know what, that guy's an idiot.
Right. I've done a lot of looking into the mind, and this is 100% true. This is why I want to have a verbal conversation, and it's because of how our brain works. And if like tribalism goes extremely deep, because for millions of years, our greatest threat wasn't some other species. It wasn't lions or tigers or bears. It was other humans, because tribes were so competitive with each other on and off. But, somebody from your tribe was safe. Somebody from outside, sure, you might trade with them, you might be buddies with them, but you're always the back of your head, you're going, if things get tight, we're going to go to war. And that goes deep, and it's a really deep human bias. So if I don't have any connection to somebody because we're just having a text conversation, if I disagree with their worldview, I'm automatically putting myself outside of their tribe, and now I'm the enemy. Like, the defenses are up like that instantly.
It's the others. We're supposed to be talking to each other, not over each other. And there comes a point where if you don't establish that bond, and this is a problem that you and I have actually had in the past, that other person that you're talking to is just an other. They're almost not person, or they're human, but they're not person. They're not personal to you. So
you go through your notifications.
Oh, that guy's just a crazy theist, or
you go
that
through
guy's
your
just
notifications. You see the notification, you respond to it, and then you're on to the next, and you've talked to 10 people.
On to the next one.
And I've legit got people mixed up before, to where I think somebody believes this, but I'm thinking of somebody else, and they actually don't. It just it happens until you actually know somebody. It's easy to not think of them that way. So for sure. So empathy, facts, and solutions. So the Bible verse I put on the thumbnail was, I thought, applicable. Didn't you call yourself like a James Christian or something, or James? I think that was what inspired it for me. I went and read the chapter you said, and I was like, I got to put the.
Oh no, I told you that. I think I told you that James came to mind when we were talking about discussing. Maybe I think. If you want to know kind of where my faith is, I consider it. I'm non-denominational, but I consider it apostolic. Now that's not a word that I came up with. The whole point of my faith is to not recreate, but to really get down to a biblical foundation and an experience that the apostles had. So I don't really get into all the theological developments post. I don't get into all that. I want a sound biblical doctrine, and really this goes further than just the Bible, because it's just kind of like all those other things we've talked about. I just want good doctrine, good teachings, good sound advice, good knowledge, and I look everywhere that I can get it.
A few years ago, because I came from an extreme fundamentalist, evangelical, literalist homeschooling background, and over a couple year periods I moderated. And until eventually I just was like, why am I don't even believe it anymore. But that said, I think the Bible is a collection of literature, and it survived a long time, and there's definitely some good stuff in there. I also think there's some bad stuff in there. But this verse is an example of some good stuff. So everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. So that's
let me go ahead and agree with you on that. I want to make sure I'm getting this right. When you say there's some bad stuff, here's where it gets a little sketchy, is because I might surprise you, but I do agree. Now, when I say there's some bad stuff, I don't mean there's necessary, and I think you might be meaning this, but there's no doubt that this is one of the things actually that makes the Bible unique, in my opinion, as to other holy texts, is that it acknowledges bad things. Like, they don't shy away from. I mean, I don't want to get into, because I don't want to jump the gun here, but if you just use the example of Jesus, it's like, I mean, how embarrassing would that be if that was supposed to be your Messiah, and you run around killing Christians? I mean, there's so many shameful things that are recorded in the Bible, shameful by their own estimation. So it's not,
I would disagree both that it's unique to the Christianity because it is another text, and also that it's just a history of bad things, because it's not just a history. I'm talking about prescriptive bad things. But anyway,
okay, that's what I thought you meant.
Yeah.
So we can move on from that for now. But
and it's something I'd love to talk about. But let me just go into my list here. So number one, and I came up with this all pretty quickly. I haven't put as much thought into it as I'd like to. So we could definitely work on it. But
okay.
My first thing was begin with values. If you don't agree on the same values, talking about anything else is a waste of time.
That's good. That's part of the bonding, right?
Yeah, and we've already done this in direct messages, but you agreed that you care more about truth than anything else. And if you're wrong, then you would want to know.
Absolutely.
I think if you don't share that commitment, then you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, if we didn't both have that, I'll be more specific. If one of us has that and the other one doesn't, we might as well just end the conversation there, probably, or come up with a different intention for the discussion. Because our intention here, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is that we both might have some sort of like secondary priority or secondary intention to perhaps persuade people of our sound beliefs, because we both believe that we have good ideas. But I think I would say my specific primary objective in anything that I do, in any endeavor, is to know the truth. So regardless of, like I said, if we establish something in this conversation right now that shook or caused me to reconsider things, and I have no problem changing my mind. In fact, I've done it plenty of times in the past. So
yeah, and I appreciate that, and I definitely have the same commitment. I've changed my mind on basically everything, and
you have to.
I'd be perfectly willing to change it back again if I found out I was wrong. And I've done a lot of work and a lot of research since then, so I'm not exactly expecting it to happen. But it is important to realize that we can be wrong, for sure. So,
see, I think this is the danger, and you'll agree with this real quick. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is important. You'll agree with this. This is the danger of religiosity. The danger of it is that people hold on to their faith, but other people do it too. It's not just religious people. But beliefs in politics have a certain, sports teams even. The point is things that we don't necessarily have a huge or know or have a real good hold on to, for some reason we hold on to them more dearly, and we don't want to let them go when we realize. It's kind of like when you found out, it's like finding out Santa Claus isn't real. It's like, just get over it. It's not real. It's okay. Yeah, it's okay if you were wrong your whole life. It's okay.
Rationally, it really is. You can get to the point of realizing it pretty easily. It's pretty easy to back up rationally that truth matters, and that if you're wrong, you should want to know. Like most people agree with that, at least in theory. But in reality, it's a lot more difficult to do that. And yes, we as humans have a tendency to cling to beliefs for a number of reasons. Tribalism is part of that. There's a number of other biases that have evolved for other reasons, and it gets complicated. But definitely, we have a tendency to hold on to and to protect our worldview. And one of the problems for me of faith religion is it makes that a virtue instead of a vice.
Yeah, that's a problem.
A lot of, I think you're coming at it from a little bit more moderate perspective, but in a lot of ways they use the word faith, not all of them, but, fundamentalist circles I was in, certainly, faith is just believing what you're told, like uncritically. And because of that, it's not open to change. It's not open to evolution. It's not open to like finding out that one of their arguments is wrong. It's just kind of stuck in the past. That's why it's innately conservative, from the literal definition.
Well, just so we're clear, because I do want to get this out there, so maybe whoever hears this will get an understanding. I'm gonna be straight. I'm gonna be real upfront with my intentions and where I stand on this. I'm a radical follower of Christ. I'm so radical that actually probably normal Christians aren't comfortable. So now when I say radical, I don't mean like radical as in I'm some sort of off the
I know what
wall.
you
I
mean.
believe in all kind of stuff.
I
Yeah,
mean,
the
so
the
was
point
I.
is that
I know what you mean.
when I find something and I feel and I get a hold to something, it's just like you. I'm passionate about what I believe and what I know because I've done the due diligence, and that's where you and I get frustrated with other people. I've thought about this earlier, and I wanted to make a mention to it. And excuse me for speaking for you, but I believe you're going to agree with me here. Sometimes our patience is lacking because we've worked so hard at understanding these things that when we come up against somebody that is kind of lackadaisical and just starts throwing out all the speech without really knowing what they're talking about, it really does grind, because it's like especially when they start talking about the other side, it's like me sitting there telling you what you believe. It's like, what? That's crazy. You know what I mean? When people take that authority that's not theirs, to when they step out of bounds and they haven't put in the work that you have, it becomes very difficult to have a conversation with people like that, because they're not interested in
Definitely.
finding truth. They're interested in getting points, right? They're
Yeah, and this
interested
is
in getting
another part
little
of how the brain
debate points.
works. So, definitely highly recommend reading the Wikipedia summary of the Dunning-Kruger effect. You're probably familiar with it.
Yeah.
It's a very specific psychological thing, but the same principle seems to hold true kind of across the spectrum. And that is that there's this interesting curve that happens based on how much you know and what your confidence is. So
Yeah.
there's an image here. So
Right.
this axis is confidence, and this one is expertise. And when you start off not knowing anything, you're at your most confident. And then as you learn more,
Wow.
you
Yeah.
get more humbled because you realize how much stuff you don't know. But then after you've
Right.
studied for a while, now you start building your way back up.
Right.
And a lot of
So it's a
experts like
bell curve.
never
Is that
really
what you're
come
drawing
across
out?
as that confident. You know, there's all kinds of like
Is it
scientists that are like down here, whereas like morons and
right?
flat earthers are up here. You know?
Yeah.
So,
But you were drawing out. You're invoking an image of a bell curve. Am I right? Are we both on the same page there? It's like a bell curve,
it's actually not.
do I have the axis is wrong? Either way, I think we're on the same page, right?
Yeah, I think you get the concept. If you search Dunning Kruger effect, it's in there.
I'll
But
look it up. I'll look it up later.
yeah,
I'm pretty sure we're on the same page.
it's
But
trying. It's
yeah,
like an inverse curve. It's like a dip. So it starts off high, it goes down, then it goes back up again.
yeah, exactly. We're on the same page.
Yeah.
It's
So
an inverted bell curve,
yeah,
right?
exactly. That's what it is. So anyway, that's that tendency. I call it arrogant ignorance, and it is the most frustrating thing in the world when you've actually studied something in
Yeah.
detail. I got a little snippy with my mom, actually, unfortunately. Going to hell.
Yeah.
Because she tags me on these memes, and it's like, you realize I've studied this for like weeks at a time. I've read books, and you disagree with me. I know you disagree with me, but you're just like tagging me on a meme. It's like insulting. Like I know
It
better.
can't. Right. It's like you're gonna need to do better work than that. You
I would
know. I
love
mean,
to actually talk about it, but this is not doing that. So
yeah.
100%. So yeah, I start
The
with
well, the
values, and I think
classical new age meme researcher is just out of this world.
anyway, so you
You
begin
got
with
the Google
values. If
copy and
you don't,
pasters and the meme researchers. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And if you don't agree on the values, then that's what you got to talk about. So we agree
Sure.
on truth. My overarching value that even comes before truth, I phrase as maximizing well-being within society from behind the veil of ignorance. So
I'm
does that
glad you
make
brought that
sense
up.
to you?
Explain
Or
that first, and I'm gonna say something on it.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, no. So I want you to expound on that, so I make sure we're on the same page on that.
Yeah. So maximizing well-being is. I mean, I think we get what that means. That people are
Yeah.
content, they're well, they're like, as they're
Right.
free. Like, we understand what well-being is. There's different paths to getting there, and there's definitely
Sure.
legitimate arguments getting there. But we want the best for people in society, and
Sure.
that's like maximizing well-being within society. So I'm not just trying to maximize my personal well-being. We're talking about society
Absolutely.
here, because
Right.
when we're talking about rules and politics and stuff in society, obviously we can't just think about ourselves. So you have
Right.
to think about how the system affects everybody. The veil of
Right.
ignorance is a thought experiment. The point of it is, uh, to try to take yourself out of the picture, so that if you didn't know where you fit in this society, you would still support the policy you're talking about. So,
That's
like,
a.
if I'm a
Mhm.
billionaire and I'm supporting a policy that says cutting the taxes for the billionaires, like, yeah, that makes sense for me. But if I took myself out of it and I'm objective, and now I
Right.
like imagine myself being born into a like poor urban family that's like barely scraping together
Yeah.
and living on food stamps, and they're going to lose their food stamps because of these tax cuts. Like, maybe you wouldn't be in support of that policy. So it's trying to take
Yeah.
yourself out of it and
Yeah.
just look at things objectively, basically.
Or even your tribe. I mean, it's not fair to play just to you and yours, because that's not truth.
Yeah,
There's something
principles matter. Principles are super important. That,
that's bias, right?
that some principles of governance and democracy should come before anything else, and more in modern politics they're not, which is very concerning. People seem to be putting their own partisan desires ahead of the very principles of governance that guarantee our system of government.
Okay.
So,
I'm actually really surprised that you said this, and I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you. About 15 minutes ago, I was thinking about that very thing. Now, we didn't word it the same way, but the fact that I was thinking about, there's some situations where the truth has to take a second seat. It doesn't take a back seat because they really are in sync. Because I believe maximal well-being is the truth. I think it's part of a different law, and this is where we're getting into the Theist territory, because and I don't want to get sidetracked on that, but the point I'm making is that I'll give you it's I don't want to get distracted, but I'll take like a little snippet from Plantinga's evolutionary argument. I think you're familiar with that one, right?
the what?
The idea is that
You mean
his
Platinga's
evolutionary
argument from evolution or
against
whatever it's called?
naturalism.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
Yeah. Okay. So,
It's like the worst argument of all time.
well, it might be. You might think it's the worst argument of all time, but what I'm saying is that there are plenty of instances where truth isn't necessarily what matters the most. There's some things that we won't know or can't know at the time, and really, what's good or the good effects is what actually matters at the time. I mean, evolutionarily speaking, this is a fact. If you like, go step out in front of that bus and see if you can reason whether or not that bus is going to kill you. You're not going to do that. You're going to instantaneously. I mean, that's a bad example, but you kind of get what I'm saying. The point is that if you've never seen a bus before and you see it coming toward you, you don't need to know physics to know that that might be a bad idea. You know what I mean?
Right, and that's because of how we've evolved. That's selected for survival and replication. We do have a really good intuitive sense of physics, like at our
Yeah.
level. Like, we might not intuitively
And we have
understand
fear. We
infinity,
have
light
intuitive
speed, and
fear.
stuff like
Right.
this, but when it talks
Sure.
about
Sure.
bus-sized objects heading toward us, we understand those physics pretty good.
Yeah. Hey, I'm using an extreme example, but you get what
Right.
I'm saying. Like, I mean, we even have fears that are irrational, but they're still good fears. Like, so a lot of people
Well,
are
it's
scared of
interesting you
water.
bring up the
Naturally speaking, it's not that bad of a
EAAN.
thing to be scared of water, huh?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the EAAN, evolutionary argument against naturalism, because that is an argument that would disagree with my like basic value here, which is I started with the well-being part. Now, to maximize that, to actually make that happen, to actually maximize society and well-being in society, you need truth, because I believe, and I think it's fairly self-evident, that more accurate knowledge of reality leads us to a greater probability of achieving our goals. So
I'll
greater
agree with that.
knowledge of truth helps us achieve our goals, which, again, that first goal is well-being. So I do
But
think truth
I
has that
believe truth
massive
is good.
benefit.
So I believe truth has a quality of ultimate goodness. So I can't distinguish between truth being, but one thing I do want to interject, and this is where I'm gonna part ways with you a little bit here, and something for you to consider. Maybe you haven't considered before, because it just occurred to me a couple of weeks ago. There is no real society. There's really we have groups of individuals, but there is no thing called society. So, like, it goes back to your tribalism statement.
Well, I think that can fuck you up and lead you down a whole, like, it gets back to the law of logic, the law of identity, because when you come down to it, all identity is arbitrary, because there's really no clear distinctions on anything. I mean, that's what the whole ship of thesis.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. As long as we're on the same page on that.
Yeah, it's arbitrary.
You have to.
We use it as a working metaphor to come up with society-wide principles and morals and politics and whatnot like that.
So when you say society, you mean in interacting groups of individuals and groups. I mean, you're just saying that as loosely as a word. You're saying. I mean. At the end of the day, you still have to be specific when you're talking about that, because I don't think it's really that. I don't think it's that meaningful to say society. I don't.
Yeah, when I say maximize well-being within society, I mean, we can definitely drill down into that more. I think it's perfectly reasonable that people look out for themselves and their loved ones first, and their own kind of local society next. Yeah. And then, it's like concentric circles. It
sure.
It doesn't make rational sense to care less about somebody in Syria than your next door neighbor.
Absolutely.
But we do.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely. Well,
there has to
and
be
I'll agree with you on that.
There,
we don't have a point of contention on your.
Them. We just
right.
understand it's not quite equal.
Well, just so we're clear, you and I do not have a point of contention on what you said about maximally. We're both on the same page. And I'm also agreeing with you. I believe it's a Christian belief. It's a fundamental belief of the fact that even though we emotionally have different attachments, there is no difference between my neighbor or my fellow human in Syria and my fellow human down the street.
Right.
And there's only difference in our emotional attachment.
Of Christianity,
right.
in some versions of it, for sure. And because, they do teach in some ways that all people are equal. Now, they make judgments between.
I wish they all did. They don't all do.
So
historically, we both know that we're not going to get into that today, I hope. Yeah. But historically, there's been some issues. But I don't call that Christian. That's the thing. I don't want to go down the no.
That's why I say some aspects of Christianity, because there's thousands of different versions of it. So certainly the best aspects of them think like that. Some of them, not so much. But not to paint with too broad a brush here, so I'll take the good. But no, definitely.
Well,
I think we have a flexible mind. It's in some ways it's software, and it is programmable, and we can exploit it once we understand it. So, for instance, we talk about tribalism a lot. If we really focus and believe that all of humanity is our tribe, it does change how you think.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a very important thing to consciously believe and remind yourself of often, that we're all the same tribe, and it benefits us to help everybody. Rising tide lifts all boats, which is true.
And I believe that's your intention. I believe that's your intention, actually, with now excuse me if I'm painting you in a corner that's not where you're at, but I do believe, I do believe that your intention with your democratic socialist views, or your what do you call it, left libertarian? I forgot how you said it.
Socialist.
Okay, so yeah, you do claim socialism as a good model, right? So I think the intention of that is part of that is the fact that there's no nation, so to speak, of this person's better than, we're all one human race. Is kind of the idea. I think
Yeah, well,
that might be more of a communist
there's
ideal,
a lot
but
of different ways to kind of conceptualize it. One of the ways, and I don't know how applicable it is, but we can try this on for size, is just imagine if we a group of like a cruise ship, it's like sinks off an island, and there's 1,000 people that are on this island now. You're not going to be like, this guy, because he's the captain, now owns the whole island and we have to pay rent to him. Like, we wouldn't
right,
set it up. We wouldn't set up society like that. We just wouldn't.
Well, that's not how society developed either. So it was a lot more brutal than that. But yeah.
Well, but when we came over to this country,
unfortunately, that guy, he didn't become captain because he didn't become captain of the island by just flying the boat, piloting the boat.
But
historically speaking, I'm saying he became captain of the island probably by
we've
force
had these
and probably
experiments,
like
and I've seen like they've done this in reality shows. Like when you have a group of people, you generally are going to agree on some system of government that's kind of more fair and representational to everybody. And you definitely want to reward people who are good at things. You definitely want leadership. There's leadership's very important. I'm not saying everyone is equal in all respects, obviously, but it's not going to be grossly unequal. You're not going to have like an upper class that owns everything right off the bat. But over time, it evolves in that direction because for a lot of reasons. And I think correction toward in the other direction is very, very applicable and useful.
Isn't that the theme to Robinson Crusoe? What is it?
Well, Robinson Crusoe, I was a huge fan as a kid, so I know all about it. I read the book several times, and but that was about one guy.
Treasure Island? Isn't that what that is, or what is it?
Robinson Crusoe is one guy who got shipwrecked on an island, and he's alone for most of it. And then he does meet a native who's like his sidekick, but a lot of it is like just about the one person. Swiss Family Robinson was about a family. I'm not sure what you're referencing to because I can't think of like a larger group.
I can't either. I'll get back to you on that one. I'm thinking of a certain book that's related to that. So when you were talking about this stuff, I feel like since we're talking about truth, if you don't mind, I've kind of oversimplified a couple of things, but this might help us put into context different thought processes historically and where we're at today. But of course, you have, and again, this is oversimplified, but there's a purpose for it, right? It's just to get a kind of general overview of how we've developed in our thought processes. So you have like a pre-modern era, that'd be what, like for the 1600s, for 1500s, I guess probably 1500s. And back then, people kind of based their lives on like a belief in truth and even in the supernatural, but they got their truth by revelation, by tradition, and even by handed down by authority, like you were talking about earlier. If this guy tells you that's the way it is, that's just the way you believe it, right? And so they believed in God, but the problem is obviously that leads to superstition. You also have abuse of authority, and also you have traditions that aren't really good. So you have, so that's kind of like where, a lot of religions have developed was in that sort of time, and we still feel the effects of some fundamentalists, some different religions. I don't really want to pick and choose and name names, but I think you get the idea that I'm saying.
You can't really talk about the history of religion without kind of understanding some sociology and the impacts on it, some psychology of how it impacts people's mind and their behavior, and definitely negatives, also positives. Now that I think all of the benefits of faith religion can be gained without the faith part, but we'll get into that. Let me just finish the list here. So
I'm sorry, I forgot you had a list. Go ahead.
Yeah, well-being in the veil of ignorance. It sounded like you agreed with that in
absolutely. I agree with it.
So the goal is to move nearer the truth. One or both of us should move in our positions, or the discussion is kind of a waste of time. If our positions contradict, we know one or both of us is
What do you
wrong.
mean move? Or you mean move together in progress? I mean,
Well,
we might not actually move off of our point. We might not.
Right. No, but the goal...
We'll learn something, though.
I'm not saying
something.
we must, but the goal is to, as an average, move closer to truth. So if one of us moves on anything, we've collectively moved closer to the truth, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's not what I meant. I meant...
Now,
I was
obviously.
I was misunderstanding you. I was trying to clear it up. I thought you. That's why I wanted you to say, because I thought you meant move, like persuade the other person. Like, I don't think that's what you necessarily meant. Obviously, that is a goal if you realize that somebody doesn't know something that you know. But what I'm saying is the overarching theme is truth. So we're on the same page, I think, right? Yeah. Go ahead.
I do think it's useful to be clear on the nature of the debate. So if we get into specific topics later or in future discussions, it can be helpful to kind of lay it out up front. So if we were talking about flat Earth or young Earth creationism, or I would even lump taxation equals theft libertarianism in the same category, I have a one-hit KO of an argument that will falsify that. So I'm not going to come out here with a gish gallop of 20 different arguments, and I'm not going to respond to 20 arguments from the other side. I'm just going to put out my one argument and be like, if you can't counter this, we're done, because I just destroyed your point.
Yeah, we don't need to. Yeah, exactly. I think your purposes should be stated up front too.
Exactly.
Like what is the purpose, right?
Now I do think some people like to have a formal debate. So Kent Hovind seems to, and like a lot of Christian apologists often insist on a formal debate where it's like, you have 10 minutes, I have 10 minutes, then we have 5-minute responses, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And I'm
not sure how productive that is.
I don't think it is either, because in that format, it really rewards a lot of kind of logical fallacies and gish gallops and rhetoric over logic, because you don't have time to really challenge people. So I've listened to a lot of debates on streams, and I really like the concept of just having a discussion. I think it's more rewarding getting to truth. And one of the main reasons is we can interrupt each other when necessary. And that is an important thing in a discussion. Because if you go on for 10 minutes building this whole argument, premise by premise by premise, and your first premise I don't agree with, then you're wasting all this time building a house of cards. Like, we need to be talking about that first thing.
Right? You just wasted time. And also, anybody that's the audience, it's a distraction, and it might be confusing, and it doesn't actually end up getting anybody close to the truth. It's actually, but you made a good point about the debate that I agree with. And just one thing, and I'll let you get back to your list. But what happens when you get into formal debates? And I don't mind watching them. I think there's been some great formal debates in history, but the problem is it ends up being a chess match instead of. So there are debate tactics that aren't necessarily about truth. Right. There are some maneuvers. Exactly. It's game theory. It's more like game theory.
Yeah, there's
certain ways to. Yeah.
Logic is about finding the truth. Rhetoric is about persuading people. And rhetoric can be used to persuade people of the truth. It can also be used to persuade people of not the truth. So, like, rhetoric's kind of just amoral in that sense. It's not particularly good or bad. But, if
like
your
just
goal
about
is
everything
truth,
else,
then you kind of want to, relax it on the rhetoric a little bit.
Science is, it's kind of like science. Science is amoral, but, you can use nuclear power for the bomb, or you can make some power with it. So it's like, there's nothing inherently moral about it, but it certainly is used for moral and non-moral judgments.
Now, that said, sometimes you do need, like, a minute or two to kind of sketch out your broad positions. So I think it's perfectly reasonable to request that. If you're getting interrupted a lot, be just like, whoa, dude, I need 30 seconds or a minute, a couple minutes. I got to lay out my position here, and then you're welcome to challenge it. And, that's... Well,
we should be charitable and understanding of each other. I think that's the main theme. What you're trying to say is that formal debates aren't necessarily charitable. They're equal. Like, everybody gets the same amount, but there might be a time where, I say, you know what, he's got some good points. Let him keep going with what he's talking about for a minute. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
there
not
might be
being
a
so
time
formal,
where I
exactly.
only need a minute to say what I need to say, right?
Yeah, definitely. And in an ideal world, like if we're having a debate on one topic, I would say both sides should have a certain amount of time, which they can use less of or a little more if necessary. But basically, both sides
Right.
present their overall case, and then both
Sure.
sides can steel man each other to make sure they understand it, and then from there you just have conversation, like instead of
Sure. Yeah. You wanna present your kind of like your opening state. There needs to be some sort of groundwork that you lay for people to know. Otherwise, you're kind of leading people down this path and they don't know where they're going. So you need a foundation to say, okay, here's kind of where we're going to start, and I'm gonna give you the overarching summary or the overarching theme of thesis of my argument, and then you get into that's a good. But
right,
so, and another thing is debate is usually adversarial, and I think what we're doing, that's adversarial isn't always bad. I mean, obviously, like in the situation of our court system, it's pretty good because you need to be able to be adversarial. But when it comes down to really finding truth and not facts or judgments, which is what the court system is, when it comes to finding truth, we need to be courteous and kind and be understanding, because if you're just battling it out, you're not actually getting to the truth. You're just battling. Those are
right.
two different things.
Uh,
So there needs to be harmony. There has to be some sort of harmonious unity or aspect in truth. You can't have two people disagreeing on truth. It's either truthful or it's not. You know what I mean? So there's got to be some sort of harmonious aspect to it.
Okay, based on a comment I just got, I'm adding another thing to the list, so we'll get there in a second.
Go
But
for it.
I did want to say, and this is the most frustrating thing to me online. I think if people value truth, then if somebody makes an argument and then it's countered, and you don't respond to the counter, and then you go and use the argument against somewhere else, like that's
Oh
bad
gosh.
faith there. Like, dude,
Yeah.
if it's a bad argument, you shouldn't be using it. And if you can't defend it, then it's a bad argument. So if an
Yeah. Well, that's
argument
something.
fails and you don't know how to overcome
Yeah.
the counter, then you should probably
Yep.
not use it, and you should probably correct other people who you see using it. And I do that all the
Sure.
time
It
for
is bad
people
faith.
on my side, because bad arguments hurt your side. If somebody's making a stupid
Sure.
argument,
Sure.
it makes your side look bad.
Absolutely. And we should all, this is a biblical principle, we should all study to show ourselves approved. I mean, so if you don't know what you're talking about, man, and you go out running your mouth, you're not helping decide the truth. you're making people wary of what you're,
Right.
it's, yeah.
Yeah.
I
The
think
rest was just
another little thing I thought about is, we should be focusing on intentions and not semantics. Semantics are good when we're talking about philosophy, so I'm not saying they're not important. But sometimes, too many times, we're putting the cart before the horse, and the intentions come first before the semantics. So
right.
if
That was
I've
actually the
said
point I
something,
just
yeah,
added.
that's what I'm. Oh, really?
Yeah, because the comment was our definition of truth might not be aligning with each other. And I think part of a good
Sure.
conversation is being careful to define your terms, because a lot of times you can spend half an hour arguing and then realize the base of the argument is you're using a different
Absolutely.
definition of the same word. You got some
Right.
equivocation. So that's important to define the
It
terms.
is
But
important.
here's the thing: like, once you understand how somebody's defining a word, arguing over the definition of the word is that's a kind of what a colloquial use of the word semantic, and it's just kind of a waste of time. Like, if I
Well,
tell you I'm an atheist and you tell me I'm not, like, that's not a useful debate.
yeah.
I mean, by
Well,
my
let me back
definition,
up.
I
Let me
am.
back up.
So,
So here, let me back up. I don't think we're disagreeing, but I want to, because semantics are important, like we both agreed. But what I'm saying is if you back up before that, let's say the guy you were talking about, you used an example of somebody arguing in bad faith. His intentions are not good. He's not trying to get sort of the truth. His semantics are irrelevant. So if you have bad intentions, if you're arguing in bad faith, his semantics do not matter, because he like, I'll give you an example. So if I'm arguing in bad faith, let's say you correct my language or my definition, or I've refuted my own definition. Well, if I'm arguing in bad faith, all I got to do is just jump and make up another word and another definition. So we can keep doing this, and I can just keep bouncing around, and you never go anywhere. You just got this troll online, and that's what trolling. That's part of a tactics of trolling is. He can just sit here and literally bounce around all day long.
That's
and
why
it's fun
critical
for him.
thinking is so important. And I think like the basis of what critical thinking is, like the difference between critical thinking and usual thinking, like a lot of people seem to conflate the two and think critical thinking is just like common sense, but they're actually completely opposite. Like common sense is intuitive thinking. It's just like, well, that's obvious. Now you might be right or
You're
wrong.
You're almost not even thinking. Absolutely.
Yeah,
that's why it's common sense. It's a sense.
Whereas with critical thinking, it's showing your work. It's being methodological. Like this is super important because when you have things like either written down or as clear as you can, like you're trying to keep things organized, then if somebody's moving the goalposts, it's a lot easier to catch them on that and be like, dude, a second ago you were using the term this way. Now you're using it this way.
Right.
Like that doesn't work.
It's also helpful. Yeah. Part of it is having that reasonable amount of skepticism to say, okay, well, critical thinking is knowing that you can possibly have it a little wrong and be willing to say, yeah, but what if this is possible? Or, there's part of that logic going. It's the same reason why, like in science, part of the methodology is developing a hypothesis. If you didn't develop the hypothesis, you would kind of never know if you were on the right track. A part of it is making that a priori statement of, your educated kind of where you think it's going to go, because then later on when you analyze all this, you can look back and say, oh, well, I am on this. I am on to something here.
A huge part of the success of the scientific method is really like in the power of words, because we attach a lot of importance to this. Like scientists don't come up with, this is my best guess on what the law is. No, they come up with a hypothesis, and just by calling it a hypothesis, it makes it different than a belief. I'm testing this hypothesis, not my belief. It's just
Well, they have a taxonomy of words, and that's why it's classification. So that is the semantical part of it. So it's like if I call one thing, okay, if I call this bird blah 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 blah, then that bird that's a different species cannot be called that same thing, right? Just as an example of taxonomy.
Keeping stuff organized, yeah.
And that's where the legal developments of the modern era, that's part of the legal developments in our political philosophies too, is the fact that we've come up with this structure, like the English common law and all these other laws, of where, we define this term as X and it doesn't deviate. So once the law has defined agency as this, or intention, whatever intent is this, then that's the structure. We're building this house, right? So that it's a sound structure that the next thing that comes along won't just push it all over, because it's a web.
Visualize it is holding your beliefs on an open palm, so to speak. You're not like clenching on it, because psychologically we have really strong biases. Confirmation bias is one of the strongest biases. Like we want to confirm our current beliefs, and
absolutely
weakening that is.
See, we're all well. Honest. If you got to be aware of that.
Yeah, like if you can consciously step back and try to be more objective, it's a beneficial thing. So when you decide to research a topic, we all have pre-existing biases. But in an ideal world, you want to kind of set those aside, and you want to look at both sides, from both sides, before you actually decide. You want to kind of hold the belief in reserve until you've checked out both sides. Because here's the thing.
Great point.
I guarantee I could convince anybody, no matter how smart you are, that the earth is flat if you only listen to me. If you only go on YouTube and you only watch flat earth videos, like if you're in that echo chamber, you're going to find yourself agreeing to it eventually. Same thing for young
especially if you're skilled enough rhetorically. If you're skilled enough, yeah. I mean, rhetorically, if you're skilled enough, you can.
Like I experienced this because when I moved out of my parents' house. I was I was like maybe 21, 22. I got a roommate, an older woman, because my roommate like went to prison. Whole other story. Anyway, so got a roommate off Craigslist, and she was like 50, and her Harley Davidson Hell's Angels boyfriend came over, and this is a whole bunch of drama I won't go into. But the point of this was that at one point, like they were trying to give me a hard time, and they're like, "Oh, I bet you're one of those idiots that believes that we actually landed on the moon."
Yeah.
And I was like, well,
Why wouldn't I believe it?
yeah, aren't we? And I before this point, I had literally never even heard of the idea that we hadn't landed on the moon.
Yeah.
Like, I'm 22 years old, and like everything I've ever heard is like, of course we landed on the moon, and we, the Russians saw it, the whole space race, all the stuff you learn. And
Right.
I was like, what? And then they start going off on their arguments. They're like, well, how did the flags wave when there's no atmosphere up there? It looks like it's blowing in the wind. It's like, well, I don't know. I guess I never thought about that. They're like, what about this picture? And what about this? And, where's the light coming from? And doesn't this look like a studio? All the crap they say. And in isolation, it makes sense. But if you go to the other side, becomes incredibly easy to debunk that. And of course, everybody has. Mythbusters has. Like, everybody has. Like, you can debunk every single argument they have. And in fact, you can even go to a university and literally prove that humans have been to the moon in several ways. Like, we've actually observed it through telescopes. The lander, you can bounce lasers off the reflectors we left behind, like all kinds of stuff. So.
Oh, really? Cool. That's cool. I mean, I haven't really gotten into that. I'm like you. Like, I did experience a certain sort of thing like that, but to me, I haven't really cared enough to know. I mean, it's just like there's some things that like it's okay to just accept. It's really not that important.
Well, and we have to. This is what I call a heuristic of critical thinking, because critical thinking is very methodological and it takes time to do correctly. So you can't just always do like the full thing. You need a heuristic, which is like a mental shortcut. It's like shortcuts to how you think. And one of the most useful is that if you're not an expert in a topic, the most probabilistically correct position is the expert consensus. We do this in everything in our life. Like, when you get in a car, you don't know anything about how it works in most cases. You don't know what's driving. You don't know the safety standards. You don't know the engineers. You don't know traffic laws. But, you trust the people.
Unless you're going to get 20 degrees in your lifetime, 20 PhDs in your lifetime, you do have to trust some experts on some things.
Exactly. So that is a good default. Now, obviously, the expert consensus can be wrong, but in every case I've ever been able to find, and I've challenged people to show otherwise, and nobody has, the expert consensus is only ever shown wrong by other experts. Like, it's not the layperson who's like,
that's interesting.
You're wrong on this.
That's a great point.
It's not the
well, the thing is though, you said a heuristic, and a heuristic is an overall guideline. Heuristic isn't a methodology to truth. It's a methodology of approximating things, because you don't have enough time on this earth to know everything. So, like, a good example is like, do I really need to get to know the guy in the alley that's got his knife out in a dark alley to make sure he's who he is before I decide he might be trying to rob me? No, I can be safe. It's just safe for me to assume that mask over his face and that knife in his hand and that aggressive posture is probably not my friend. Even though there's a chance that he's about to open up a can of sardines or something. He's homeless and he's cold. But the point of the matter is, it's perfectly reasonable to assume that maybe I don't need to be around this guy right now, right?
Right, exactly. So
that's kind of an off-topic example, but I'm saying,
thing. And I think I understand the mind very well. I've studied it like basically my whole life, and the conscious part of our mind is basically the operating system for the brain, but the mind goes so much deeper. If you just think about it logically, we know that the mind controls your heart rate, your breathing, all the processes of your body. It's storing everything. Like, think about this. If you're in a busy restaurant and there's 50 people in the restaurant, there is so much sense data coming into you. Like every
Yep.
quarter inch of your skin is sending data. You can hear
Sure.
50 different conversations at the same time. You can smell thousands of things. You're tasting food. You're following conversation with the person across from you. Consciously, we can only follow, depending on your level of focus and how good you are at multitasking, 1 to maybe 5 streams of message units. So I can follow the conversation and think about how good the food tastes. And if something like otherwise, I'm not going to really focus on anything. But the interesting thing that lets us know that our subconscious, unconscious mind is paying attention to everything is you're having this conversation, and all of a sudden somebody across the restaurant says your name just in a conversational tone, and you heard it.
Right.
Because your unconscious mind flagged it and was like, this might be important to you. Or like somebody walks by you that you know and you spot their face, even though you didn't consciously see all the other faces going past you. You spotted that one.
Yeah, those are natural heuristics.
Yeah, your unconscious mind gets all the sense data. And it's in there. And it's only in short-term memory in most cases. So it's not like you can go back and exactly remember things from 10 years ago.
It's just it's filtering out and telling you what you need to know, basically.
Right. So the unconscious mind is massive and deep and very useful. Like it has so much more processing power than your conscious mind. That's why the intuition is so valuable, because your unconscious mind can process a bunch of stuff really quick and be like, dude, you got to pay attention because that guy in the shadows over there is going to jump out at you, or whatever. Like you think about like a quarterback and all the stuff they're processing without thinking about it, because they can't possibly process like the speed and velocity of every single person and how the body posture is showing they're going to make a cut, and the speed of the ball, the trajectory. There's just too much to consciously process. But they've done so much training that it's in their unconscious mind, and their unconscious mind just like takes over like through intuition, and that's how they do it.
Right.
So
the NBA player does not have to think about that free throw. He's not thinking at all. Matter of fact, if that quarterback is thinking,
yeah, if quarterbacks think, they're kind of toast. So
they're toast.
Intuition is super important. I definitely don't mean to like make it not. It's just not especially good at finding truth, because it's only based off your current experience and your current beliefs that you've been raised with, that you've come to understand. Sure. A perfect example. I don't know if I I think I'll pull it up here in a second, but I have a perfect example of this, because the mental axioms that kind of there's unconscious rules, beliefs, axioms, whatever you want to call them, that control how your unconscious mind thinks, which is really fascinating. And you can consciously change those, and it changes like who you are and your beliefs, and it can change your behavior. It's like part of hypnotherapy and changing people's habits is kind of getting into the unconscious mind. And so being aware of what your beliefs are very important. So there's a beautiful little logic experiment, if I can find it in my favorites here. I'll bring it up in a minute. But I have a little drama apparently going on in my comments, so I think I have to adjust that real quick.
Well, let me know if you're still going on with that list too. I wanted to hear the rest of it.
That was pretty much it. It talked about like logic, like things being valid, and premises being sound, as well as the importance of consistent standards of evidence. That's all should be fairly obvious.
Exactly.
And, it's easy to address as you go. Okay, so I got that loading. I just wanted to pull up. All right, so I got Mark Collins, which do I know him from Facebook? I think so. He's trying to troll me about apparently Biden winning in South Carolina, which of course he's been pulling.
Oh well, I got internet now, forever, which is good.
Not terribly surprised about that.
I got internet.
But Biden has one office in California. He hasn't campaigned in any Super Tuesday states. He's about to get slaughtered in 2 days, so I'm not especially worried about Biden and South Carolina.
Right. Well, you got to forgive me, because I told you I've been out of town for 2 months, and part of me being out of town was I wasn't. Yeah, I was taking a break from social media and TV and that sort of thing, and it was actually a great experience not to have to pay
Totally.
attention to all that. But
And
I
thanks for
am
dropping in
politically,
small Terry. I see you in there.
and
9/11
but
was
in
an
2 months,
inside job.
politically, in this climate, politically, 2 months is like half a lifetime. So
Oh, totally.
I really couldn't
Huge
tell you
changes.
what's going what's going on. So I can't be too well versed in talking about that right now, but maybe some other time. But I think I'm about to have to run here in about 2 minutes. But I think we should definitely continue this. So if you're done with that list, can I just make a couple mentions as we're closing up? There were a couple of things I
Yeah,
thought about
like I
earlier.
said, I got plenty of time, so go for it. I do want to decide on a topic to talk about. I'm open on Monday, or we can set it for later. But for me,
Monday's fine with
the
me.
most pragmatically most important thing, I think, on the fucking planet right now is getting Bernie Sanders elected. So if you're not going to vote for him, like whatever's keeping you from voting for him is the most important to me. Now, I suspect
Okay.
from your conversations, the most important thing to you is kind of along a more religious angle, and I'm perfectly willing to talk about that too. So we just need to decide what you want to talk about specifically.
Probably. I mean, like I said, politically, I mean, right now, I'll be honest with you, man. I got so many things going on, and something happened a couple months ago, and it's like, I'm telling you, like a light switch. I just could care less about politics anymore for a minute. And maybe that was because I just had some goals, personal goals that I was trying to do, and I guess these conversations started wearing on me, and I just kind of snapped one day and was just like, you know what, I don't care. So, I mean, I am voting for somebody, so I don't mind. If that's the most important thing to you, it is your show. I wouldn't mind maybe brushing up on a little bit and seeing if I can catch up on a little bit. I just want to tell you out, up front that,
No, yeah, I
I'm not
appreciate
sure
it,
how well.
and I
It won't
think
be a
you've been.
debate. Let's just say that, because I won't be. But we can talk about It might be useful to talk about politically why we're voting for who we want to vote for, and like what. Maybe we could talk about what is it that you want the other side to know. Since we're talking about this, communicating with the other side, is what is it that you want the conservative? I'm not a conservative Republican. Let's just get that off the top, but I do align with some of their values. But let's just say, because we have a two-party system, let's just say, what do you want the Republican to know that what do you want them to understand to vote for Bernie? Let's just pretend that you can actually convince a conservative Republican. I mean, I'm not sure you can. I'm not like I said, there's a lot of things about the Republican Party that
Well, I
I
think
detest.
given
So,
time, I think I can literally convince anybody that's not already a billionaire. Like,
okay.
it's a pretty clear case, and I feel like I can build it up for anybody. I have a lot of the
How
same.
about this?
I have a lot of the same values I had when I was conservative, and I just think he does a better job of maximizing them. So
Hey, well,
I
you did
don't think
convince me
it's
of a
that
few things, so I'm not
difficult.
knocking you. So how about this? On our next talk, if that's what you want to talk about, it can be convince the ANCAP at Libertarian. I'm not really ANCAP, but I kind of used to be for a minute. But convince the free thinking, laissez-faire Libertarian that he should vote for Bernie.
Yeah,
The choice
easy,
here's the thing:
easy.
the choices out there,
Like I
the
said, I'm
choices
a
out there make it
libertarian.
pretty good for you. Right, but I'm saying that the choices alone make your case pretty good, and it's, even
Yep.
though I'm not excited about Bernie at all,
Well,
but I will say that
that's
the
why I'm
choice.
confident I can persuade people,
Well,
because
you can convince me.
even
I
if you
believe that you
hate
can
both
possibly convince me.
people, it shouldn't be that difficult to make a case for Bernie over Trump or Bloomberg. And I very firmly believe that nobody else has any chance whatsoever, and they're not even worth fucking talking about. The
All right, we're good.
idea that somebody like Joe Biden or Amy Klobuchar or Pete Buttigieg or Elizabeth Warren are going to win a brokered convention over the guy who's promising to spend the same amount of money that Hillary Clinton's entire campaign did in 2016.
Yeah.
Like, no, money talks
All
and the
right.
rest walk, man. Like,
Sure.
he's
Sure.
gonna win it. He's already trying. He's already out there trying to buy super delegates and shit. There's been articles on
Okay,
it.
so let's talk about. We can either talk about convince Wesley that Bernie's the right choice, or because I think you're more confident in that. And see, since I've been out politically, that might be a better discussion. Or we can talk about Trump versus Bernie. You know.
Yeah, and
I'm not a supporter. I'm not a supporter, just for the record.
So that's really the important thing.
There you go. There you go. That'll be good.
Yeah.
But just for all your viewers, I'm not a Trump supporter, even though I know you would disagree sometimes. I don't support political candidates, okay? I support actions. I have a philosophy of my own, and when it's either good boy or bad puppy, you know what I mean? That's the way I look at politics. Because I don't think any of them
scratch my head more than anything is when I see somebody say something like, "I don't like Bernie," and it's like, he's not running to be your boyfriend. What are you talking about? Like, what does that have to do with anything? Like him? I don't like him. Like, why do you?
He's not your therapist.
Young people and millennials are flocking to Bernie Sanders. It isn't because he's a sex icon. Right?
Oh God!
I mean,
that is the enigma, but that is what people are wondering about. People are trying to figure out.
It's the integrity.
Why in the world are all these young people? That is where he is really. I mean, to be honest with you, that is his Donald Trump moment. Is a lot of people can't figure out, and I use that. I think you know why I'm saying it like that. It's the underdog moment of why in the world do all these millennials all of a sudden want to vote for this old white guy? He's not really a white guy, but you know what I'm saying.
Well, it's because the media has made this. They've done this for decades. They make every election like a personality battle, like it's a reality TV or something. So it's no wonder that the guy who's actually from reality TV finally won the presidency. The mainstream media has been setting it up for this forever, and the reason they do it is because they don't really want to talk about policies. Because if you get talking about policies too much, it hurts those in power and doesn't. They don't want to help the people. They want to help those in power. Like at the end of the day,
I'll acknowledge that. I'll acknowledge that the establishment has been trying to rob Bernie since the get-go. So it's amazing that he's done what he's done. I'll give him credit for that. I'm not really sure how he does it, but it doesn't matter. That's some. Maybe you can explain to me.
By like some cultural thing or his personality. Like
I do get that. I do get his. I do get his philosophy. I think is what's appealing.
You know, a lot of
he's saying what people are thinking.
In a tough position. Yeah. You know, they're looking.
I think he's saying what people are thinking.
Yeah, he's saying what people are thinking. You know, the whole Occupy movement happened before Bernie, and it was very similar. It was very aligned. Sure. So that movement pre-existed him, and he's just saying the right things. But what really
but then
makes
you also have the Antifa development.
The
Antifa development's not worth.
Is that he's been consistent with it his whole life. Like, it's not like he looked at the Occupy movement and did some polling among young people and was like, if I say these things, I'm going to win. No, he's on record saying this shit for 50 fucking years, and that's unheard of in politics. Like, that's what I care about, because so many politicians say one thing
to be pretty,
and then they do something else when they're elected. Stable. So integrity is everything to me. Okay. But no,
there's more than that. Just that to integrity, though. Here's the problem, and I'm not going to speak on it yet because I don't have the. But I am going to look. I'm going to look more into it so I can at least be well enough versed to have a conversation with you. But there are some things about him that I am curious to what your response will be. So, because integrity isn't just about being consistent. I mean, obviously, right? Integrity is also about being honest, being consistent historically, but it's also about being consistent philosophically. Like,
right. So,
you need to be logically consistent with the way you need to walk the walk and talk the talk, basically.
If you're trying, you might be making the point that as an individual, it's very important for us to be willing to admit when we're wrong and change positions. So, like, as an individual, I'm perfectly good with the fact that I haven't been consistent over my life. The reason it's so important for politicians,
me too,
is because they always evolve away from the people's interests. Like, they don't just happen to come to a position. It's because they have lobbyists in their ear and donors promising them money and stuff like this that they evolve.
Right. I mean, I think his consistency. I think his consistency is a philosophical bonus, because I think he's he is being philosophical about it. It's not he's not doing it from a populist standpoint.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's how you know
There's
the
so many
populist. The
videos
populist is,
of him talking to
yeah,
an almost empty Congress and just like
right,
saying things
sure.
that nobody agreed with.
He's
Like,
not a Nancy Pelosi or a Hillary Clinton.
yeah,
You know,
like he's
those people,
over-calculating
those people will tell you
politicians
whatever you
or
want to
just
hear.
like
Right.
the people don't trust him anymore. And this is what a lot of the mainstream media don't get because they love him. The liberals love these centrists and how they talk. And Pete Buttigieg, he's so smart and he says he knows 7 languages even though he really doesn't. All this kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Hey, God, that stuff blows my mind, dude. How people gosh over this stuff. You're just like,
Well, it's
oh,
funny
he's
because
just so.
people have challenged because it's public record what the 7 languages are, and like I think one of them was whatever the language they speak in Norway, and then someone was like, so say this in Norse, and he was like, apparently he totally botched it. So there's a lot of skepticism that he actually speaks 7 languages.
Well, he probably learned some vocabulary words, and that just counts for speaking languages.
Yeah,
It's
so,
loose.
I mean, anyway, like I said, he's
hey, I can speak Spanish, Hebrew, and Greek. I know 5. I also know Tagalog from the Philippines because I know 5-10 phrases that I can speak. Yeah,
So,
I'm well versed.
Definitely want to talk about politics, but I also like the religious conversations. Like that's actually my bread and butter. That's most of my experience debating online was apologetics of various forms. A lot of it was like young Earth creationism and evolution and versus creation and this kind of stuff. But also more advanced like apologetics and theism and type of discussions. So if
I
you
think
wanted
we'll give
to,
I think you and I will give a.
If you wanted to talk about your last couple of months and the experiences you've had and kind of where you're coming from, maybe we can lay some foundation for a future talk.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm quite ready to do that. I've just had a lot going on this weekend, and I don't want to kind of be jumbled.
Yeah, fair enough.
I will say though that because this isn't something new. Well, I'll say this. I've had a few epiphanies on how. Like I'm just using that word. I'm not really sure if that's the best word, but I've had some light bulb moments on, how these things can be better discussed, and I'm not really sure how it happened or why I got it or whatnot, but I think this conversation has been a good example of it. That anybody that goes and looks at our history will see some near violent. If we were in the same room, one of us would have probably slapped the other one. Who knows? Not really, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
We've gotten
it's
into
easy
some pretty
to
contentious.
imagine that based off the text, but whenever you're actually talking to people in person, it all of a sudden gets a lot easier.
Of course not.
Sure.
But the point, I don't think we're having this peaceful discussion just because we're talking on the phone. I think we have made some strides. I think, at least I have. I think you would say the same, that you and I have learned some things recently. So you can correct me if I'm wrong. We've learned some things recently, or at least between our relationship, where of how to be more productive in what we're doing. At least in debate. I've changed my entire method of debate. So, number one is my intention and purpose. I'm not interested in getting into any debate, any sort of argument with anybody that has, number one, bad faith or personal attacks, and also every discussion I get into, it needs to have a well-established good purpose. So if this conversation we're having today, the reason I'm doing it, I wouldn't be doing this for other reasons. The only reason I'm doing this today is because I know that there's a good purpose in this. There's going to be a good outcome in doing this. My life's too precious and my time's too valuable to be sitting around bickering with children. Like I'm just too old for it. You know what I mean? And maybe I'm kind of growing up in the last few months. It's just I've kind of all these years, and you spent plenty of time doing the same thing, but all these years of going back and forth trying to convince the wall that it's wrong is just, and it doesn't. The wall's not moving. Okay.
No,
they're not interested in being.
I've tried
they're not interested in being right.
Like depending on kind of my mood and how much time I have or how impatient I am, It makes all the difference in the
Yeah.
world.
I mean, every
Sometimes
now and then you might want to
I'll try
devolve
to
and just
draw
go and
people
beat
out
somebody over the
and
head.
like get some like a good conversation started. I mean, usually it's not worth it online anymore, but I've tried that no end of times. But sometimes you have like 1 minute to respond, and you just do it in like the most short and brutal and freaking nuclear take you can. Just destroy the argument,
Yeah.
and
And I've been
it
doing
makes
the
you
same
feel
thing.
good. It rarely is convincing to people, as it is in your own head, I think.
Yeah, and
Because
you wouldn't know either way because you're not really paying attention to where they're at because can't see them and you're not really paying attention to their responses. So really, in your mind, you think, oh yeah, that was the zinger. That had to have convinced everybody in the world that I'm right or that this is right. And in reality, everybody else is looking at it like, dude, that guy's nuts. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Even though you are
no,
right.
all my
Let's
takes are
just say
good.
you're
Come on
right.
now. No, but it's true.
Yeah,
Like,
I
people
think that
disagree.
too. Hey, well, first of all, mine and your takes, they can't all be good. Let's just
Well,
because they're
exactly. That's
both
the law of
mutually
contradiction. That's
exclusive.
why we got to talk.
Yeah, so we'll iron out some of it, and hopefully we can iron out a lot of it. And I'm willing to change my mind if you're willing to change yours.
Yeah, you bet. No, it'd be a good talk.
I think we
And
can.
I just read the best article yesterday from Current Affairs by Nathan Robinson, and it examines the
I saw that. I saw it.
national. Did you actually read the article?
No, I'm gonna read it, but I didn't
Yeah.
get a chance to. But I
Highly
just saw it and
recommend
I
it. Like
bookmarked
before we
it. Yeah.
talk, like we might not even have to talk if you read it. It's really good because the
Okay. Good.
National
Yeah.
Review did a whole issue against socialism. Like the whole point was to like bring out all the best arguments against socialism, and then Nathan
Yeah.
Robinson just kind of comes by and like swats them down like little bad little
Really.
puppies here.
National Review's been hit or miss for me, man. Sometimes I'm like, man, these guys are brilliant, and then sometimes I'm just like, man, what planet are y'all on?
I mean, it
It's
depends
like,
on the topic. Like there's definitely things that where I'll say that the right is correct. I think the moderate right wing position, which barely exists anymore, on guns is correct, which is pro Second Amendments. I'm very pro Second Amendment. I think gun control is perfectly fine, like some regulations, some required training for certain types of guns and whatever. Like, but I don't support gun bans. By any means. So, like, I would agree with them on that. I was just thinking of something the other day, and I'm drawing a blank. But yeah, there's a couple things that I do think the right is correct on. So it's not like they're always wrong. And some things, when they talk about it, they sound very intelligent because they are, and it's actually making a good point. Liberty is important, freedom is important, and we should have to do a public justification of any infringement upon anybody's individual liberty. Like that's
absolutely.
the type of libertarian I am. Now I happen to think that all of Bernie's policies are fully justified, and most of them actually increase like the net liberty in society. It might hurt a billionaire a little bit, but it doesn't actually hurt their life. Meanwhile, it's helping like millions of people be more free because they don't have to think about healthcare costs, for instance. So like,
well,
there's an argument to be made.
My mind has changed a little bit. Yeah, my mind has changed a little bit on the liberty thing. It's just I'm with you on the liberty argument, but when it comes down to it, I'm sorry, I was going to say something else and I totally lost my train of thought. But my ideas on that are changing. I mean, a very brief example is I was very rigid on the Second Amendment, and I'm still am. I mean, I believe in the Bill of Rights and everything, but it's so misinterpreted, and the way people defend it and everything is most of them, the way as far as I can tell, I have no idea what they're talking about, and so it's really kind of like it's almost like the Bible. It's like, and it's because you got this older document, and the language is a little bit different. Nobody's really taking the time to really study it. And so you got a lot of people that's like their daddy raised them on guns, and so or it's just a part of their family's Republican, so it's like America, It's like
it's not coincidental that the right identifies as much more religious than the left does. Like the importance, like in actual statistics, I believe the left is about as Christian as the right, believe it or not, but in terms of the importance of religion, the right ranks it higher. they tend to be less
Well, that's what
moderate
I was
and
going
more
to talk. Yeah,
fundamentalist. And that's the same kind of thinking, because a fundamentalist Christian is thinking of the Bible as the Word of God. This is from on high. It's kind of an authoritarian type of thinking. And they think of the
sure,
Constitution the same way,
sure,
but it's all interpreted from within their paradigm. So in actual effect, like the policies of the Tea Party type Republicans are not consistent with the Constitution in a lot of ways. You know, there's
sure,
so many right
absolutely.
wingers that claim to be defenders of free speech, but where are they when their Republican states are passing laws criminalizing speech? In the case of the anti-BDS laws, like the
Oh,
courts
there's so
are
much
ruling
hypocrisy
that
on it. Yeah,
as
there's so
a
much
violation
hypocrisy
of
on
free
it.
speech, but none of the free speech warriors even talk about it. Like, it's very hacky
Yeah.
to only talk about free speech things when they benefit you and not otherwise.
Well, I think that liberal theologians and liberal people of faith, um, well, historically they've adapted Christianity to the demands of secular thought. So it's like they're not really afraid to break with the authority and tradition and say, you know what, we have some demands here, like um, same-sex marriage, or you know what I mean, like, or abortion, or whatever your secular demand is. Oh, and that's what I wanted to say about the liberty thing is really, I live by this, and this really comes down to my faith. But I live by a higher law, and we're not going to get into all that right now. But so my faith has been increasing lately, and to me, none of this matters anymore. So it doesn't matter to me what, now, me personally. Now, it does matter, obviously, to society. But, I mean, if people want this, then give them what they want. You know what I mean? It's like, you can't make somebody, that's where my liberty thing is. You know, you can't, I'm not really interested in forcing people by the gun to do certain sort of behaviors, because you can't change a person's heart. So really, or you can't change it that way, at least. So really, there's no, I mean, with the exception of like violence and that sort of thing, like the whole, our legal system is just kind of a mess. I think
The
we have
legal
so many
system
laws
is a
now that
huge mess.
nobody even knows what's illegal or legal, huh?
It's a huge mess. Now the government does, like, just logically need to have a monopoly of force. That's its primary purpose of existence. This is something I
Yeah, I
have
don't
a
mind that.
very firm disagreement with, like the strict libertarians on. That try
Yeah,
to pretend like all
I've had to
government is
walk away from
bad
that
and
too.
all taxation is theft. Like that doesn't stand up to like the most basic intellectual analysis. I put it right up there with the flat Earth, to be honest.
Yeah, I heard you say that earlier. That's me. We'll get into that. I'm sure I'd love to get into that one with
No,
you.
I'll
I don't
agree
like that
with you. There's a
catchphrase
lot of
anymore.
potential for bureaucracy and corruption in government, but like it's not
Yeah.
innately bad. It is actually necessary in a lot of respects, and a lot of things it does
But
better than anybody else. So that's kind of
the thing is
something
I
we'll have to
think
talk
the
about.
whole concept of government has a basis of wickedness to it. So it doesn't bother me that, I'm not saying anything surprising or shocking when I say, oh, well, taxation isn't just, or blah, blah, blah. I'm kind of speaking in ideals of like what an ideal society, like an ideal. I'll give you an example. A great quote that I like by Thomas Jefferson. He was making a mention. Now I won't be able to quote it right now, but he was talking about how Native Americans live, and he was like, you know, if I could come up with any sort of governance, it'd be just like theirs. But the fact
Oh
is
yeah,
to scale, you can't have that. It just doesn't work.
our
So we have to be
Constitution was
practical.
actually inspired in large degree by the Iroquois. I might be mispronouncing that, nations of the Native
Iroquois, yeah.
Americans. And
Yeah, so we have to be pragmatic about our legal system and the fact that our government might just be a necessary evil. It'd be really nice if we could all live in these familial communities and everybody was nice to each other and kind and they all gave charitably and nobody lacked anything. That sounds great, right?
Yep.
But the fact of the matter is there's a lot of people that want your stuff. There's a lot of people that don't like you. There's a lot of people that could care less if you eat or starve to death. So there are people that really aren't interested in the same things we're interested in.
Right,
And that's just the reality of the
libertarian idea of a free market doesn't seem to conceptualize this, because if there wasn't a government there to guarantee and regulate and make it a free market, the free market wouldn't exist. And we've had this, like in the Wild West in America,
well, that's interesting.
in third world countries, as they develop capitalism. Like we've had situations where there wasn't really a government on regulation, and there's just a free market running wild. And what you end up with is a company town, because they bought the whole space, and they hire mercenaries to go around, like, literally trashing anyone who tries to compete with them, right? Like, there's no free market.
Well, it's like the Pinkertons when what you call it, tried to unionize.
Exactly. In the Wild
they
West,
went in there and just started shooting people.
Pinkertons to go bust up the unions, right?
Right.
Like, there's no freedom in that scenario, because the people with the most power
sure
have no interest in freedom. They want theirs. They don't
well,
care about the rest.
That's a good place to stop it, because I think that's where we can resume our discussion, because I've changed my views on, I used to be a little more hardcore libertarian, but I kind of walked away from my faith. I didn't walk away from my faith, but it just I wasn't really practicing it like I would have liked to be. And, we all go through seasons, and we all get kind of stale with some things. But as I'm getting more serious about the way I'm thinking about things, I'm not as rigid on those things anymore. Because, like I said, there's just I'm trying to focus on higher principles that really, it makes some of this stuff, if you want this, if they want that, then they can have it. The government just doesn't really, it doesn't affect me that much in my everyday life. Is kind of what I'm saying. So,
yep. No,
for other people, there might be some people that are down and out that feel like they need that, and that might be what they believe that they need, and they might seek that. It's just, for me personally, it doesn't matter to me.
I might be wrong on this, and we'll have to see in our next discussion, but I honestly think there's much less distance than people imagine between a more moderate libertarian and like a Bernie Sanders, like, democratic socialist. Like,
I would love to hear that.
They imagine this giant gulf, but once you agree that there is, like we do need government and not all taxation equals theft, suddenly that chasm's gotten a whole lot smaller. So we can talk about the different things. I did want to speak to that, the principle of comparison. Like, this is, I think, I haven't been able to find it, like, in literature, so I don't know, like, what to call it, because it's kind of just something I came up with. But it exists I'm taking it from the scientific method, because you never just look at one hypothesis and go, is this true or false? You always compare it against another hypothesis. You have this hypothesis, and then you have the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis is what's currently accepted. Right. Now, if you don't have a null hypothesis, you're still comparing two different things, and you're trying to figure out which is most probable. Because you can't really logically consider one thing in isolation. So I think this has broad applicability all over the place, and I bring it up because, speaking to politics or moral issues, it's important. So, like, you called government a necessary evil, and I would push back at that, because unless there's a more moral option, it is the most moral option, and thus it's not evil, would be my argument.
Okay. Well, I think there is a more moral option. I mean,
yeah, and if there's a more moral option, that's
law is for the lawless, man.
That's
law is for the lawless.
What's lawless?
A law is for the lawless. A safe driver doesn't need speed limits. They don't drive too fast. So I realize that there are ignorant people out there, and there's people that have no concern about safety. Government.
Now,
so yes, that's what I mean by necessary evil.
Works, like, that's super important. But I'm just saying I wouldn't call government innately evil. That's what I would be pushing back on.
Oh, well, we'll have some good discussion on that. But the part that you're talking about comparison, I kind of have had the same thoughts lately, and you made a good point about, and that's something I think we'll have plenty to talk about on. It's sort of like the law of analogy. There's certain things that you have to have some analogy and some sort of relationship. Everything in rational thought has to be comparative, right? So everything's a ratio. So you can't just think of one thing in isolation. There's no such thing. Everything that we
Right.
think about, we compare it to and contrast it to other things, and that's the only way we can actually make sense of the world. That's how we think, right?
Right.
Well, at
100%.
least in terms of rational thought, that's how we think. I mean, there's other ways
Yeah.
like intuition that we
I
talked
mean,
about earlier, but
that principle, which again, if somebody can correct me and tell me what it's called, because I'm sure it exists, but it applies all over the place. I already brought it up. Like if you're talking about flat Earth or the moon landings are faked, if you only look at that one side, it's easy to be convinced. But you have to compare it to something else, and then determine which is right.
yeah, it's
If you
a
yeah. So anyway, yeah,
I don't
we
remember
got a
what
lot
it's
of room
called,
for
but
discussion in the future.
um
I sent you 2 links, and I've had them up on my
it's a
screen, not talking
fallacy,
about them.
logical fallacy. Yeah.
Yeah, but I sent you the socialism link. I'd love it if you read that and thought about it, and we can talk about it. And I also sent you a
Sure.
link to Damon Garcia's YouTube channel because I think
Okay.
you'd probably identify with him. I'm a fan of what he's doing. I don't agree with him because his whole thing is he's a Christian leftist, and
Okay.
he's actually a Christian
That will be
socialist.
interesting.
So like
Yeah.
he believes in Jesus and like he talks about the
That's a
Spirit.
unicorn in my
He
opinion.
uses
So
good
that'd be interesting for me to
metaphors.
listen to.
It's very very interesting if you're a Christian, and I think there's a good role for that. I'm
Yeah.
skeptical of religion generally, but I can see that there's different types of people, and to some people, it might just be that they're always going to be religious, and if they are, then I think the kind of model he uses is a very beneficial one.
All right.
So
Sounds good.
anyway, check it
Yeah,
out.
we'll have good discussions. And
Awesome.
hey, look, it was an honor and privilege for you to invite me on this, and I really appreciate it.
Oh, I
And
appreciate you
I
coming
thank
on.
you for your
It's
I thank you
tougher
for
than
your
I expected to
hospitality.
get
Cause
people to come on.
yeah, what's that?
It's more difficult than I expected to get people to come on because it's so easy to
Yeah, I
debate
mean,
people online, but to get someone to actually call in, now that's a whole other thing.
hey, you got to show up and
Take some
you got to
balls. So
defend what
I
you got
appreciate
to
you coming up.
walk the walk, man.
I mean, you don't
I don't
know.
mind my
Yeah.
words being tested. You know, I don't mind my words being tested, and we're just getting started, man. We're gonna get into some real meat to where we can actually analyze some of our thinking and see, how it stacks up. Because this discussion today, as great as it is, we didn't really disagree on anything. So we'll get into some good stuff, some good meat. That was the milk, but we'll get into some good meat that I think.
I think it was
It's
a good
necessary milk,
foundation.
though. I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to this stuff. A lot of people don't realize that you do
Well,
need to, if you want to talk to somebody,
this
you
is
need to
kind of my
establish this.
brand, and I fully realize it's not going to be all that popular because people, like, what attracts people is drama and blood sports
Right,
and
right.
I crushing him and leftist destroy.
Well, you're still doing a good work,
atheist
and
destroy.
that might attract people. Yeah,
So I mean,
it's not gonna
think
be
it'll attract some
it's not
people
gonna
that
be the
are
most popular YouTube
interested,
channel. Right.
but
Yeah.
I have a good
Right.
time with it, and hopefully a few other people do, and that's all I really care about. So
Well,
anyway, thank
somebody
you
will
so
get
much
some
for coming
benefit
on. It
from
does
it.
take
That's
balls
for
to
sure.
just like jump on there on the public, even if it's not a huge audience. Like it's just there is an audience, so it's like
Sure.
a little bit different. So anyway, I super appreciate you coming
Well,
on.
I will be
And,
back
let me
as
know
long
when's
as you
good for
invite
you.
me, and as long as we have good purpose and good intention. As many times as you invite me and I'm able to do it, I'd love to do it. So
Cool.
thank you
Well,
so
I
much.
appreciate it. Have a good night.
You too, brother.
Awesome. So it was a good discussion. Didn't have a huge audience. Wasn't really expecting it because I know Vosh and Xander Hall and probably every leftist on the planet is streaming because of the South Carolina primary, and that's kind of my base of support. And I'm sitting here talking about something completely unrelated. So perfectly okay. If you watch this later, appreciate you coming on. Like the title and the whole conversation is just about how to talk to people, and I was trying to like we talked about some of the points. Some of the points I didn't really talk about, but I'm trying to model, and that's being respectful to people, like giving them space to talk. Like even if it's something I disagree with, I'm gonna let him kind of say his piece a little bit. I'm gonna be respectful to what he's talking about, I'm going to say if I disagree with something, but I'm trying to build rapport there. And I think we had a really good talk and built a foundation and connection on that. So I think I'm going to wind it down, go get myself some dinner. I came on here and streamed like it's right off of work. So I woke up at 7:30 in the morning. I mean, I was at work at 7:30 in the morning and did all the crazy Saturday stuff in the car business and then came straight here and streamed. So kind of wore out. So anyway, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to be out canvassing tomorrow. Biden just apparently won a huge victory in South Carolina, and the media is going to try to pretend he's back. He's not. He has no freaking chance. And you're fucking high if you disagree. I'm sorry. Like, he might come in second in delegates. Don't matter. He's going to lose the brokered convention. Because the guy who can fund the entire election out of his fucking petty cash account is going to win the brokered convention. He has more money. He's funding all the superdelegates campaigns, because superdelegates are often like elected officials themselves at one level or another, and he's donating to their campaigns. He's talking to them. He has, like, money is power, and he's got all of it. In fact, before I leave, I just want to show, hopefully I can find it really quick, show kind of a visual aid for how rich he is. And I just shared it on my Facebook, so it should be right about there. Candidates' wealth to scale. So Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden. Elizabeth Warren was surprising me. I didn't know I'm like, where'd she get all that money from? I thought she was a poor teacher or something. But, she did work for Harvard, and I don't know her whole background. So anyway, Tom Steyer. Now, if you look at it like this, it's like, oh yeah, so Bloomberg's richer than Steyer, but there's a scroll bar here. So that's Tom Steyer, 1.6 billion. And that's Mike Bloomberg. And that's still Mike Bloomberg. And that's still Mike Bloomberg. And that's still, shit. Does it end? Exactly. You think that guy is going to lose a brokered convention? You're fucking high. Joe might come in second, but he'll lose a brokered convention because the brokered convention doesn't need to go off of votes. So if Bernie's close, if he comes in at like 48%, 46%, he might be able to make a deal and like them if there's enough public support, which is why we need to be in Milwaukee protesting for Bernie Sanders, insisting that they honor the will of the people. But if he has popular support, he can win it based off the people. But if it's not Bernie, it's going to be Bloomberg, because it's going to be either the people who win or the money that wins. And this kind of money does not get ignored. So I'm not interested in talking about Joe Biden anymore. Like I was attacking different candidates at different points in the campaign. Pete Buttigieg and Amy and Warren even and Joe Biden. Like we can sit here and make fun of them and memes and criticize them. I'm here to tell you, they're red herrings at this point. They're irrelevant. The true choice is between Bernie, Bloomberg, and Trump. That's it. We don't have to make this complicated discussion of, well, who's better, Warren or Bernie? Because, they have very similar ideologies. Questionable, but this is what a Warren supporter might say. But Warren's better at getting things done. Or she's, the first female president. Or whatever they got. It's irrelevant. I'm not even going to sit here and if they're open-minded, I'm going to talk to them about Bernie for sure. But it's just she's after Super Tuesday, which is in like 2 freaking days. It ain't going to matter. It's going to make it very clear that it's Bernie and then a brokered convention. And anyone who thinks Warren or anybody else has a chance on brokered convention, again, is crazy. What's going to happen, they're going to probably stay in it right up till the convention because they're trying to split the vote to create a brokered convention, so they have to stay in it. I would expect if a campaign's running out of funding and would normally just drop out, I would expect Bloomberg to secretly fund them because it's so important to split the vote so there is a brokered convention. And then they're going to go into the backroom doors, deals and smoky rooms and they're going to wheel and deal, and they're going to sell their delegates to Bloomberg in exchange for vice president or funding for their Senate campaign or their next presidential run or for a cabinet position or what have you. And Bloomberg's going to win it. Now, there's a small possibility that the DNC establishment and others will be able to lean on Bloomberg, and maybe he doesn't even really want to be president, so maybe he'll king make somebody else. There's a small possibility. They could be like, sure, Bloomberg's not going to win, so we'll let you pick, and he'll king make somebody else. It's not functionally different to me, right? I mean, it's still fucking Bloomberg. Like, if he puts up a little puppet that he's financing, it's still his candidate. So yeah, let's keep it real. It's between Bernie Sanders, who has the will of the people backing him by far, like more donations than like everybody else probably put together, like more volunteers than probably everybody else put together. It's ridiculous. Or it's the money. And that's power right there. Like, so many people can't comprehend this kind of power. Let me just... So all of the House and Senate candidates running in the 2016 election cycle put together raised and spent $1.6 billion in 2016. That's all of the House and Senate put together. You know how much work went into their raising $1.6 billion? They're out there fundraising, talking to people. They're out there doing wine caves and like courting high donors. And they're getting a few $1 million from this billionaire and a few $1 million from this billionaire. And they're fucking fighting and scrapping their way up. And here comes Bloomberg. He's like, yeah, I'll just give you these couple of lines off the top. I got, plenty more. And he's offering to completely fund it by himself. Now, that was the House and Senate. I was kind of, I think this, yeah, $2.4 billion. Like, he can literally spend, I think he's pledged $1 or $2 billion. But he could easily afford to spend more than all elections in 2016, like all the state, all the House and Senate and presidential elections from the GOP and the Democrat side. He can just fund that out of his, like, the interest on all this money. Like, he would be just as rich afterwards. And if he stops a wealth tax from going in, which is going to cost him billions of dollars, it's like several $1 billion more than the cost of he's putting into the election. I wonder if that's a coincidence. Probably not. So anyway, this is an important thing. I'm probably going to make some individual road rants on, because some people aren't going to make it all the way to the end here. But yeah, it's Bloomberg or it's Trump or it's Bernie. It's the people or it's the money. And if trying to find my freaking thing here. If we don't get Bernie nominated, then we have a choice between two GOP racist oligarchs, and that's not a choice. So we're going to be in a very tough position then on not having an option to be represented in our government, and that's when revolutions have typically happened. Certainly, it justifies civil unrest. That's why we're saying Bernie or vest. We're going to be out there protesting with yellow vests on, and we're going to shut some stuff down, because if you deny the will of the people at the convention, you're going to leave us with no other choice. So anyway, thanks so much for coming on for our little ramble, our little conversation, and I'll call it quits. Have a good night.